Barron Ridge Speakers Agency proudly presents Speaker Spotlight, highlighting one of our keynote speakers from across the nation. Now, here's your Spotlight host, Mindy East.
Good afternoon. This is Mindy East with Barron Ridge Speakers Agency. My special guest today is Gigi Sabbat, one of my favorite speakers with my agency. Gigi, welcome. How are you today?
Fantastic. It's an honor to be here today, Mindy.
Well, thank you. It's usually the other way around. You've interviewed me twice, so I'm a little bit novice at this. And I wanted to read your intro, and just so our viewers find out a little bit about you. You're a 3-time best-selling author. You're the co-founder and CEO of Life Service Center of America. You're one of my top-notch motivational keynote speakers in my agency. You're a first-generation Haitian American. You're actually a law student, and you've served an internship under Marco Rubio. You're the host of the award-winning Walk With Me podcast. You've been endorsed by Les Brown, and I think that's all our time we have. So anyway, I'm just so honored to have you today. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Such an honor.
Well, tell us a little bit about how you came to found the Life Service Center of America and what your mission is for that organization, please.
Absolutely. Great question. So essentially, Life Service Center of America came about after I almost lost my life. That's been almost 3 years now, almost 3 years. And for me, that was the aha moment. And that was when I was in a domestic violence relationship. And here I am today standing before you as the woman that I am, but I could not have been here if it were not for God. And so after everything that happened, I stepped into his purpose for my life, understanding his purpose for my life. And I haven't looked back since.
That's amazing, because so many people go through life and they never connect the dots to a higher power. And God is just behind every creative idea we have. He's in our imagination. He's in our survival skills. And I love that you give him credit, as I do for me. Okay, so there's that power inside of us. And when you were about to lose your life, how did you make that transition to decide, moving forward, if I survive this, I want to help other people?
Absolutely. Great question. So essentially, the domestic violence matter occurred while I was in law school. And also, too, I was a residential manager for the Human Development Center. But I got the shock of my life one day. I'll never forget. I had just got done studying, and then I was on a phone call with a colleague from the SBA. I was on the couch, and the abuser charged at me, beat me, almost strangled me to death, threw my phone across the room. And when I tried to get back up, I fell flat like a vegetable. And at that moment, I thought my life was over. It was that aha moment for me. And I'll never forget, the domestic violence advocates told me I couldn't get back up because I had lost oxygen to the brain. So the fact that I'm still here and I'm able to utilize my skills and my knowledge is truly a blessing. And literally, just by listening to God, he commanded me to launch Life Service Center of America. He commanded me to host these events that I'm doing. And it started off with domestic violence. The first event was the Global Virtual Panel of Domestic Violence Survivors event. And I brought expert leaders from all over the world to not just raise awareness, but educate others about what domestic violence is. So when we talk about domestic violence, it's not just physical. It's also emotional, mental, financial, and then there's PTSD that's tied to it. And then it's not being taught in our society that this is also happening to men. It's not just happening to women. So it starts with us as advocates in our community to educate others about this. And then also, too, the narcissistic character traits. I actually mentioned the wheel in my book, Walk With Me, which is a spiritual walk. It's not a physical walk. And in that book, I mentioned the entire wheel for the narcissistic character traits, so folks know those character traits to look out for. Because if we can intervene early on, then we can prevent this. And when Les Brown wrote the foreword for my book, what he talks about is it's a survivor's handbook for toxic relationships.
Amazing. And I'm fortunately, by the grace of God, I've never been a victim of domestic abuse like you have, but I have encountered some narcissistic people. And I have learned that they actually seek out people with certain personality types like you and I, who want to help other people. And so reading your book would, even if someone's not involved in a domestic relationship, they could be a target for a narcissistic person at work or in their neighborhood or within their family. So I'm sure they could learn something valuable from your book as well.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. And that's the thing. Narcissistic character traits are not being taught about in our society enough. And yes, you can deal with a narcissist at work, such as Rebecca Zung. She's a huge advocate for narcissistic character traits, so people know the signs and the red flags to look out for. And so when we talk about those signs and those red flags to look out for, that's letting folks know, hey, this is not just happening in those toxic relationships, as you mentioned, Mindy. This is also happening in the workplace and in so many different areas of our lives. But if you don't know those signs and those red flags to look out for, you may just end up dealing with a narcissist and you won't know until afterwards. So if any of these signs that we're talking about, or this rings a bell, I would highly recommend that you seek help for the person that you're observing this happening to.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a time to step up. And I think we all know when that time comes, we need to be present. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about your topics for the survivors of these seminars. So I was honored to be involved in one of them. And excuse me, some of the other topics that you've been helping reach people through would be alcoholism, infidelity. Can you share some of your other areas that you're helping?
Yes, ma'am. So it was such an honor to have you as the keynote speaker for the global virtual panel of infidelity survivors. And that topic is such a, for most people, it's a very complex topic. But when you spoke, you raised awareness and educated others that it doesn't have to be complex. And there are solutions, there are positive solutions, and you can overcome. There is hope, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So if you are an infidelity survivor, there is hope. And you're a walking testimony of that, as well as the other speakers on the panel. So very, very, very powerful. And also, when we talk about the other events that I've been having, it's just me listening to God in regards to the topics that he needed me to discuss and where he needed me to serve. And I just listened to him and I stepped into purpose, listening to him. And so when we talk about those topics, such as recovering alcoholics, it's so important, so important. A good friend of mine, Ken Wallace, he was a huge inspiration behind that event as well. Why? Because he's a recovering alcoholic. And also too, it's not being talked about in our community enough.
Mm-hmm.
And he shares that oftentimes on his podcast, and you'll hear him share that. But this is the thing, when these survivors came together, they helped others understand that they're not alone and that you can overcome alcoholism. You don't have to let it define you. And then what I noticed too is a lot of people didn't even know if they were alcoholics. They would turn to alcohol for certain healing processes, things of that nature. And so what they did was, when they tuned in, they said, okay, now I'm going to see if I'm even an alcoholic. And I said, oh, so when you talk about survivors resource training, people were using it for that. And then people were also utilizing it to see, are they a survivor? So it was a very, 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 very powerful resource for folks. And then also too, you talk about the other topics that we were talking about in regards to mental health. Mental health is such a huge aspect, a factor in our society right now, which is affecting lives. So many people are committing suicide. Hence why I hosted the suicide attempt survivors event.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I love the fact that you give power to the person who has survived. It's not a victim mentality. You've given everyone the platform of having the survivor mentality. And I got so much out of listening into the seminar that I was involved in, just how different people coped with the same problem, the same issues, how some people walk through like a cakewalk, and other people, it was really a heart-wrenching struggle. So I appreciate you giving a voice to all the people whose healing is part of their story being told as part of their healing. So tell me how you got connected with Les Brown, and then I want to talk about some of your topics that you speak on.
Yes, great question. So as far as Les Brown goes, that's the thing. I connect with so many people every day throughout the day. And every time somebody asks me that, I don't recall how him and I connected. But when we did, it just, him and I just clicked instantly. And for him to understand everything that I'm about now in regards to purpose and understanding me as a domestic violence advocate, and he's 100% supportive of that. And for me, I was just really grateful, because not a lot of people understand when you say you're a domestic violence advocate, what that truly means. So to receive support from him and to be endorsed by him, it's a blessing. It's truly a blessing. And I want to circle back to what you talked about in regards to these events as well, and the survivors. And I want to share with people that when you almost lose your life, you start seeing from a different lens. And so that's what happened here. I don't see the same way that I used to. And for me, it's just, again, an aha moment. And you talk about all these survivors. I understand them from a place of pain. And that's why also too, my next book is a book collaboration. It's titled Overcoming Heart Blocks. So just making the announcement now, but it's coming soon. And it's with several authors from all over the world. So what that is we're going to actually share stories, inspiring stories for healing from trauma. So what I found is, and this is my sociologist background and from all the research that I've done, is that when we talk about the heart block, this is now talking about trauma and how it relates to the heart block that people don't even know that they have. A lot of times people go throughout their lifetime and they say, oh, I have this wall up because I've been traumatized. I was sexually assaulted, or domestic violence happened, or I was trafficked, something. I had, infidelity in my life, and I'm a survivor of that. That's trauma. All those things are trauma. But now we have to talk about the component of which, how are you operating everyday life? How are you operating in your everyday life? Yeah. Are you truly healed? And most likely what I found across the board is that folks are still healing. And what that is, it's a heart block that they don't even know that they put up. So it's deeper than a wall. And so when Bob Proctor talks about the subconscious mind now, that's the same thing here. When we talk about overcoming heart blocks, it all intertwines, it's connected. So I went deeper into the unconscious mind. And what I found was when somebody is dealing with that trauma and healing from it, they now are operating at a subconscious level. Sometimes people are drifting through life. They're not even conscious. Mm-hmm. So say, hey, did something occur in your life that you have not faced yet? And when I say face it, I mean that you acknowledge that something very traumatic happened in your life, and that until you face it and acknowledge that it happened, you cannot move forward in your life. You cannot live life to the fullest. You're not living life to the fullest. So heart blocks interfere with our daily lives.
Oh, that's so insightful. And that's so true. And, hurt is hurt and pain is pain. So even if someone hasn't walked the exact path that you or I have, they can still learn those techniques and tips to reach deep down inside and figure out where that blockage is. And it's so true. That heart is responsible for everything in our lives. And if we have it walled up, we can't really allow other people to love us or we can't love others if we're not aware of that. So I appreciate that so much that you're doing that. Okay, well, some of your most popular topics, you speak on women's leadership. You're a powerful female speaker. You also, besides surviving the domestic abuse, you have a speech on surviving sexual abuse. You have a resiliency and mindset speech. And then you're also a huge advocate for being a responsible financial manager.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
so
ma'am.
Tell us a little bit about some of those topics.
Absolutely. When you talk about the sexual assault, so for me, I was sexually assaulted when I was 8 years old, and then again as an adult. And for me, as you mentioned, with that heart blockage, you talk about being sexually assaulted at 8 years old. For me, that affected my social relationships and my friendships with folks. And so I went throughout my entire life just being an introverted person, introverted leader. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm such an advocate for this topic today, so that people they can understand it doesn't matter where you are currently in your life. You can come forward and share your story, because as my publisher mentioned to me, it's going to help save someone's life. And so when it happened again as an adult, I had become numb to pain. But again, after my publisher heard my story in regards to domestic violence, sexual assault, he said, share your story. It's going to help save someone's life. And so I did. So I became an ambiverted leader, which required that I am vulnerable and able to share these things. And so I did, because if it's going to help save someone's life, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. So here I am. And I want to help others do the same, because how many other men and women are out there that have that heart block and are silent?
True. Absolutely. Now, I know because of your law background, you're getting ready to graduate. You'll be a full-time lawyer, but you also have a passion for finance. So law and finance go together really well.
Yes, ma'am. So for finances, as far as finances go, I do have my license in the state of Florida. And then as far as law goes, my BA is in political science, pre-law and sociology, and I am finishing up my legal studies. And for me, just like my financial license, when I'm done with the legal studies, it's just going to be another hat that I wear in my business. I'm a firm believer that if you have the skills and the knowledge to help someone, then utilize all of your skills and the knowledge for the greater good, to serve God's people. Because ultimately, as his servants, that's what we're called to do, is to serve his people. And so I don't want to ever shut the door. If a client comes through my door and I have the skills and the knowledge or resources to help them, then I'm going to do so. If it's something outside of my scope, I will then refer them to somebody who can help them. Hence the second aspect of my company, which is the Business Service Navigator, in which I partner with business owners from all over the world to provide their services to our members. So now our members don't even have to go through thousands of web pages to look for what they need. They have the drop-down menu and they have the service providers that I partnered with. So it's a very simple process.
Oh, well, you've made it simple. I think it's very daunting for some people, but you make everything look easy. So tell our audience, if someone wants to go back and catch one of those seminars on one of the global summits that you've produced, where they can find that, and then tell us a little bit about your books too.
Yes, ma'am. Great question. So they can find all of the personal growth trainings and the survivors resource trainings on my website. That's www.lifeservicecenterofamerica.llc.com. And if you go to the events page, you can definitely check that out. And as I mentioned, Mindy, you were the keynote speaker for the infidelity event. And folks, I highly recommend tuning in and listening to that event and listen to Mindy's speech, please.
Well, I wish I would have kind of put the little happily ever after on there, but, and I won't, this is your interview, but I did survive, and not only survive, but I am thriving. And I realized that divorce was not a punishment from God, it was a provision. So once that happened, once I changed my story that I was telling myself in my brain, everything switched. And now I'm married to a wonderful, godly man, and I've done things that I couldn't have done if I were still in that other marriage. He said, "I'm sorry I ruined your life." And I said, "You didn't ruin my life, you set me free." And sometimes there are people that we're entangled with or holding on to in life, whether that's a family member, a business associate, somebody that's we're entangled with, and they're actually holding us back, and we could be holding them back a little bit too. So I appreciate everything that you're offering within your skill set. So tell us about the book titles and where the listeners or the viewers can find those as well.
Absolutely, yes. So Walk With Me and God First. It's a sequence. So when you talk about, for example, walk with me, right? What does the Bible say? Bring my people to me. So that's what I'm literally doing with Walk With Me and God First. So walk with me, just listening to God as I'm writing the title of my book, Walk With Me. And I say, God, walk with me. Right? And I said, okay, but that's being obedient to him and understanding, okay, walk with me. I didn't need to understand it fully. He understood it fully. And as his disciple, I then understood what he needed me to do here on earth. And so when you talk about walk with me, it's all about helping others understand the importance of never giving up, no matter what trials or tribulations that they face in their lives, and understanding that they too can overcome. And then when you talk about God first is so important because why? It is not being talked about enough in our society. It's not being talked about in our society enough. And we need to raise awareness about the importance of having him first, because we would not have all the issues that we have in society if people were to keep God in his proper place, which is first. And then look at the history. Look at all the history. And I did the research already. Okay, I referenced the folks in the book as well. You talk about Billy Graham, Bill Bright, Brad Bright. What they were trying to tell us is that we need to keep God first in our lives. They would say things in the past like God is the issue. But a lot of folks, they misunderstood what they were trying to tell people. When they said God is the issue, they said, oh, some people would think, oh, God is the issue. Okay, then we're not going to talk about God. But that's not what they were saying. They're saying God not being spoken about in our society is the issue. So I actually mentioned the entire chart, the breakdown of what all of these people who came before us, amazing leaders, were trying to teach us. And I put the chart right here in the book for you. And then I also mentioned for folks to go and check out the Rock, the Road, and the Rabbi. Go and check it out. Why? Because you're gonna go on a tour in Jerusalem. Okay, and you're gonna understand. You're going to understand God is here with us. God is here with us. You just, that's what they call it, believers, right?
Yes. I think when you can tap into that higher power, when you actually put him first, then he will give you the secret desires of your heart. I saw a little meme today and it said, God's speaking, saying, I gave you that business idea, so quit worrying about it. And how often do we second guess because we're not in alignment? We're this way when we should be this way. We're looking at, all the things that aren't working rather than the one thing that is. So I appreciate it, that book. I can't wait to read it. And you have a third one coming out, right?
Yes, ma'am. And that's a book collaboration. So that's my first collaboration that I'm the visionary behind. That's Overcoming Heart Blocks. And believe it or not, originally it was just a book that I was going to write all of the chapters, but it actually became a book collaboration. That's just listening to him. And so again, as his servants, we have 2 ears, 1 mouth. So when we get quiet, we can listen to him and we can understand what he needs us to do. And understand, sometimes we can create all the plans that we want, but God knows the plans that he has for us. And also remember what Joshua 1:9 states is one of my favorite verses. Haven't I commanded you to be strong and courageous? Do not be afraid or discouraged, for your Lord your God is with you wherever you go. A lot of folks believe that they're alone on this journey. You're not. God is the creator of all things. So remember, he's with you wherever you go. You're not alone.
No. And Gigi, you're one of my most popular speakers. And if anyone out there would like to hire Gigi for their next conference or event, you'd be great. I mean, you speak at women's events, you speak at church events, you're a leadership speaker, business speaker. There's just so many things that you can speak on. And one thing that we do at Barron Ridge Speakers Agency is I work closely with meeting and event planners. I find out the goals and the vision of that company. And then I, in turn, work closely with Gigi, and she comes in with a customized presentation from an outsider who has an insider's perspective. So we're here to help you as we get back on our feet and rediscover our footing after COVID. We're ready to come to your event live. We're here for virtual performances. So feel free to reach out to me, Mindy East, at Barron Ridge Speakers Agency, and I will get Gigi reserved for your upcoming stage or event. And Gigi, I just want to thank you. And why don't you give us your website address once again, where we can find your books and all of your past videos and seminars, and then we'll just kind of have a close here.
Yes, ma'am. And I want to leave your listeners and your audience with this, to remember to maintain a resilient mindset. No matter what you go through in this lifetime, get back up. and keep up the good fight. Don't let life knock you down. Understand that we could take all the precautions that we want, but don't blame yourself if something external happens to you. If you go and you take all the precautions in life and you do what's right and you're a faithful servant of God, but then something external, that's what I call it, external, happens to you. You didn't see it coming, but it happened to you, and it was not beautiful. It was negative. Don't go on in life bitter. Don't go and live a life of hate. Live a life of love, no matter what. And remember what the Bible says. Father, please forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. So when you forgive, remember that you're releasing all of that toxic energy from you. And until you forgive and you truly forgive, I'm not saying, oh, I forgive, and then you're talking about it continuously. No, I'm talking about forgiving and moving forward. Because when we leave the past in the past and we take the positive lesson with us, and the lesson with us, we continue to grow. But you really have to learn the lesson. Otherwise, you're going to continue to have that repeated cycle over and over again. So again, maintain a resilient mindset no matter what. And folks can find me on my website. That's www.lifeservicecenterofamerica.llc.com.
Oh, wonderful. And that was a perfect close for where we're at right now as a nation, where we're at right now, getting out and back up on our feet after a pandemic, and a great place to launch to move forward into a life of healing and restoration and forgiveness. So thank you so much, Gigi, for your time today, and best wishes to you on the new book coming out and for continued success.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Please join us next time. For more information on booking a keynote speaker or event MC, contact Mindy East at Barron Ridge Speakers Agency.